There's something strange about Ludacris because during the 2000s he seemed unstoppable. Huge hits.
Get out the way, get out the way, get out the way. If you got late bills and you lost your job, tell me what you gon' do.
Watch out, my outfit's ridiculous. In the club looking so conspicuous. And
Still, you might say this is Ludacris, but tie your crew, tell her how you feel. When I was 13, I had my first love. There was nobody that compared to
Revolutionary hits, Grammys on the shelf, a personality so outrageous that he turned any song into an event. But at some point, one of the most creative rappers of his generation simply disappeared from the conversations about the greats of hip-hop. And maybe the answer lies in a certain movie franchise about cars that changed the guy's life forever. I know today's conversation is going to make a lot of people sad, but we need to talk about how much Fast and Furious affected our guy Luda's pen. But first, what's up Gerson Saldanha's crew? Listen, if you're not subscribed to this channel yet, man, now's the time. Subscribe, hit the like button. People aren't liking the videos much. You think I don't notice, huh? Turn on notifications. T-shirt link is in the description. Products related or not to Luda will also show up throughout the video. So let's go, because today's discussion is complicated and I want to see you guys commenting down below, alright? Christopher Brian Bridges was born in September 1977 in Illinois, but he moved while he was still young. He went to Atlanta, Georgia. After graduating from high school, he went on to study music management at Georgia State University. Because he had been exposed to music since childhood, by age 9, he was already creating his first rhymes. His time at business school was definitely not by chance. Unlike many artists who just stumble into the studio, Christopher wanted to understand how the gears worked behind the scenes. And his big opportunity basically came in the mecca of hip-hop, rap, trap, and black culture as a whole, which was Atlanta. More specifically, working at Atlanta radio stations. Under the codename DJ Chris Lova Lova Lova, he got a job at Hot 97.5 Radio, which would later become the legendary Hot 107.9. There, the young rhyme spitter became one of the most popular voices in that city. He spent his days analyzing what made a song blow up, just like a certain YouTuber you watch here on this platform. He also wanted to know what people really wanted to hear, and just as importantly, he understood how artists promoted themselves. In other words, the radio was the perfect laboratory for Chris Lova Lova Lova. He used the station's microphones to drop his own freestyles and short rhymes on the air, creating a huge local buzz. And then everyone in Atlanta wanted to know who that charismatic and funny announcer was, who had great flow, really cool rhymes, and breath that seemed infinite. Then Ludacris realized that he had the product, the talent, and the business knowledge. All he needed was to take the first step. It was around that time that he dropped the name DJ Chris Nova Lova Lova, and then his super creative pen wrote the name Ludacris, and he was already there, ready to take over the world. And it was exactly in the radio station's hallways that Ludacris' destiny changed. Because he was one of the most influential DJs in the city, Chris ended up meeting none other than Timbaland, who at the time was already one of the most brilliant and sought-after producers on the planet. I'm sure I don't even need to tell you about Timbaland because you watched my video about the producer himself. If you haven't watched it, I'll leave it here in the card. Watch it later because it adds a little to this part of the story. And impressed by that radio host's stamina, Timbaland didn't think twice and extended an invitation. He called Ludacris to rap on the track Fat Rabbit from 1998.
So open up your eyes and get a surprise like in Cracker Jack.
Down. Still credited as Ludacris with a CH, that song was the push he needed to break out of his bubble, from radio to real music, at least on the Atlanta scene. But what he proved with that song is that radio studios had become too small for the great artist that was emerging. With Timbaland's support, radio experience, and a music management background, it was clear Ludacris wouldn't wait for a record label to approach him, right? Then, in 1998, using his own money, he founded his independent label Disturbing the Peace and released his debut album called Icon Negro. The album was a huge local success, selling 50,000 copies out of car trunks and in stores that sold physical CDs. In other words, there was no distributor, no suits, no record label, nothing behind Ludacris. It was just his talent, networking, and man, his will to succeed. Then the track What's Your Fantasy became an instant anthem on the streets of Atlanta. Ludacris's lyrical genius was wide open there. Ultra-articulated flow, rhymes full of double meanings, and a comedic delivery, but meticulously technical. But it was obvious that it wouldn't take long for Ludacris's flow to cross the borders of Georgia. Then the giant Def Jam realized they might have gold in their hands that just needed some polishing, and the guy could really conquer the United States and the world. So they rushed to Ludacris, took the bass from the Black Icon, added some new tracks, and in the year 2000 they re-released the project to the whole world under the title Back for the First Time. The album reached 4th place on the Billboard 200, the main album chart in the United States, and also brought classic singles like Soul Sultana Hospitality, which was a collaboration between Ludacris and Pharrell Williams.
I'm burned in the 3rd degree. And if you sweat in your sleep, then you sweat from me.
So man, the southern United States had finally found a new idol for that generation. However, the mainstream wasn't ready for what was coming. And from that point on, hip-hop witnessed one of the most meteoric rises in the history of the genre. In 2001, Ludacris released the classic Word of Mouth, and this is where his pen reached the status of a weapon of mass destruction. And he scored other classic hits, man, like Move Bitch, and the classic Area Codes, which was even on the soundtrack of the movie The Wash. Damn!
Get out the way. Get out the way. Get out the way.
And actually, this track marks Ludacris's first connection with cinema. But Ludacris's real trick, honestly, wasn't just in what he wrote, you know? It was in the way he packaged and delivered it. With this serious gangster aesthetic, Ludacris and director Dave Meyers revolutionized MTV. They simply created an ultra-colorful, cartoonish, and brilliant visual identity. And everyone, man, especially kids and teenagers, would stop to watch Ludacris's music videos because everything was so cartoonish. It was all like an animated show, you know? Everything was so exaggerated. Who doesn't remember that song Roll Out, where Ludacris showed up with a huge head? I know some of you watching this video are going to say, I was scared of that music video. Because I get it, man. His stuff was kind of weird, right? In fact, Roll Out got Ludacris nominated for a Grammy later on. In short, guys, the dude was a well of creativity. He made kids go on TV. They made the car bass shake. He made rap purists drop their jaws with his lyrics. And not to mention the microphone thing, right? He was a mutant. Ludacris used to change his flow 3 times in the same verse, had insane breath control, and delivered the most memorable punchlines of that decade. And between 2001 and 2004, it was impossible to turn on the TV to MTV Music Show, Videotex, or anything like that and not see at least one Ludacris music video there. The guy was really the king, so he already ruled the music scene. However, Hollywood was about to cross his path. But before we talk about Ludacris and Fast and Furious, we need to go back in time and understand how the Fast and Furious franchise started. In the first movie from 2001, director Rob Cohen thought it was essential to bring in a heavyweight rapper to give the film some real street authenticity. I admit that the choice was tough back then, man. There were a lot of people they could have picked, like DMX, Jay-Z, but in the end they chose Ja Rule, who, let's be honest, was also dominating the charts at the time. Ja Rule's role in this first movie was just a cameo, right, as the driver Edmundo. When the Fast and Furious sequel was announced, they also said they would change the director, with Rob leaving and John Singleton coming in. He had the same idea and also invited Ja Rule to come back for Too Fast, Too Furious. But Ja Rule demanded a much bigger role to do this movie, which was about $500,000. According to interviews with John Singleton at the time, he said that Ja Rule simply wouldn't answer his calls for a possible negotiation. And that, due to the fact that at that time, Ja Rule was having a lot of success with Jennifer Lopez's songs. He was hitting #1 on the Hot 100 several times at the same time, and like, he was a legend back then. That's real talk. For real. Yeah, he kind of said that Ja Rule was feeling too big in the music industry to go into movies. So the director didn't think twice, he just scratched the character from the story and decided he needed another rapper for a completely new role, which was the mechanic Ted Parker. And with that, the invitation ended up in Ludacris's hands, who was already getting some praise because he was in the movie The Wash, you know, the one with Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre. Man, a quick side note here about my movie buff side of the story. John Singleton, he wasn't just any director. Simply inviting him to direct the next movie, Fast and Furious, was a very smart decision by the studio, and I'll explain why in a moment. John Singleton, may he rest in peace, already had experience with more urban movies. The studio wanted to reach more black audiences and rap and hip-hop listeners. Just so you have an idea, it was John Singleton who directed movies like Boys in the Hood from 1991 with Cuba Gooding Jr. and Poetic Justice, that classic we always talk about here, with Janet Jackson and Tupac from 1993. And just before Too Fast, Too Furious, he had directed Baby Boy in 2001 with Tyrese, who was also in Too Fast, Too Furious, so this sequel was not going to go wrong at all. It was going to become a classic, it was born a classic, but it wasn't certain that Ludacris would get this role yet. Other rappers were also invited. But the way Ludacris prepared for the audition is straight out of a movie. The year was 2003 and Ludacris was touring the United States along with none other than Eminem. Then, Ludacris was getting ready to go on stage when his manager got a phone call with the following message, which I'll paraphrase for you here. Hey man, Universal Pictures needs Ludacris to audition for the movie and they only have today to do it. So with only 15 minutes left before Ludacris went on stage to rap for hundreds of people, he had to grab the script, record a bunch of stuff, and do that audition. No time to get nervous, right there in the dressing room. He recorded his lines on an improvised cassette tape, ran to the stage, and then did the show. And the rest, as you all probably know, is history. The tape ended up in the hands of John Singleton, who immediately fell in love with the way Ludacris acted, and also with the guy's charisma, and wrapped up the conversation. Man, the role belongs to Ludacris. When the movie Too Fast, Too Furious premiered in theaters during the American summer of 2003, the impact was immediate. The movie broke box office records, earning over $236 million worldwide. And a big part of that young, electric, and charismatic energy came indeed from Ludacris, playing the role of the mechanic Ted Parker. You've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But the masterstroke of the guy in this first movie he was in wasn't just acting, but also being part of the soundtrack with the song Act a Fool. Check it out.
Just came home from doing a bid. Tell me what you gonna do. Act a
This track became an instant anthem. The music video almost looked like an extension of the movie itself, full of tuned cars, neon colors, and that ultra-creative signature of Ludacris in the rhymes. Act a Fool played non-stop on MTV, man. They played that song a lot. And of course in sound systems all over the world because everyone thought they were Toretto in real life. The success was huge, and the track ended up being nominated for Best Song at the Grammy Awards for Music Written for Movies. At that moment, it seemed like Ludacris had basically hacked the system in a way that no other rapper had done before. He was shining on the big screen and at the same time scoring some of the biggest hits of his music career. He was the king of both worlds. And maybe right there, guys, a silent exchange was starting, let's put it that way. Because the bigger Ted Parker got, the less the world started to see Ludacris as a rapper. Well, the problem, as you know, and we talk about it all the time here on the channel, is that some people take this hip-hop court thing way too seriously. In the same year, 2003, riding the huge wave of the movie, Ludacris released his fourth studio album titled Chicken and Beer. The album did very well commercially, even bringing the hit Stand Up, which was produced by Kanye West before he blew up.
big. Let me see something. Tell your little friend he can quit mean mugging. I'm lit, no?
That song reached #1 on the Hot 100 and was also included in the soundtrack of the movie You Got Served. The second single, Splash and Waterfall, was also another huge hit. The second single.
I'm about to throw some game. They both one in the same.
But behind the scenes among specialized critics, the first whispers started to emerge. Some hip-hop purists started to say that even though the album was good and sold well commercially, Ludacris's lyrical cohesion was starting to fade at that point. And the first whispers of gossip in the scene started to emerge. Is the guy trading rap for Hollywood? Is Hollywood messing with Ludacris's fighting spirit? The following year, in 2004, the pressure increased with the release of the Red Light District. The album featured excellent tracks like #1 Spot.
Kiss the plaintiff and the wifey. Drove through the window, the industry supersized.
But who here doesn't really remember Ludacris with those huge arms? I think it's one of the most memorable music videos of his career, which was for the song Get.
Get back, get back. You don't know me like that. Get back, get back.
But with the success of this album, the criticism started to get heavier on Ludacris, with people saying that this new work seemed to have a tired pen. The image of the irreverent rapper who revolutionized music videos was now sharing space with a businessman in a suit on the red carpets. For many critics at the time, Ludacris seemed to be on autopilot in the studio and saving his best energy for the movie screens. Part of the fan community started to point out that Ludacris was now turning into a pop star and someone who was too commercial, and that he was only rapping to fulfill his contract. And that great force from Atlanta was starting to fade away. In the midst of all this pressure from rap, the Hollywood movement ended up giving some breathing room to Ludacris's pen. That's because in 2006, Universal Pictures decided to radically change the direction of the franchise with the Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift. The studio's idea was to create a completely new story, with different concepts now focused on drifting and set in Japan. And because of this move, most of the original cast was left out of this movie, including Tess Park. But to maintain the connection with hip-hop culture that the director really wanted, Hollywood ended up casting another rapper from that time for the cast, who was the young Bow Wow. With the movie engines completely shut down, Ludacris now had 100% focus to turn to the studio and deliver class. Then, bothered by the criticism that he was losing 100% of his eye of the tiger, his tiger's eye, he decided to go to the studio and really give an answer to the people. He cut off his iconic braids, adopted a more mature look, and released the album Release Therapy. The concept was clear, guys. He still wanted to prove to the people that he was the GOAT, but a GOAT with a concept. In Release Therapy, yeah, the album was kind of divided into two sides. The release side, which was the venting, and the therapy side, which was the therapy. And man, in the lyrics, there was a bit of everything, especially songs with a strong social appeal, like for example Runaway Love. Ironically, the plan worked for the industry. The album was a critical success and gave Ludacris his first Grammy for Best Rap Album. But for the more hardcore fans, the price of this maturity was pretty high. That ultra creative, fun, and energetic signature that made Ludacris a shapeshifter in the 2000s had disappeared. It seemed that for him to become a serious rapper, a more mature rapper, he had to sacrifice the very trait that made him a unique rapper in the scene. Ludacris still had some good success with his album Battle of the Sexes from 2009, which brought hits like My Cheek Bad. But the movie industry was knocking on his door for him to come back.
Saying my chick bad, my chick hood, my chick do stuff that your chick would do.
But before stepping on the gas and going back to movies, I think this time the rap purists would have reasons to criticize him, because it seems like the pop world discovered Ludacris. And then, my brother, it was just skyrocketing from there, and the features were a weapon for that. So think about it with me for a second. If in the first half of the 2000s, Ludacris still managed to flirt with the rap and R&B crowd, like for example when he was featured on the song Yeah by
Foot Patrol.
How you like me now when my pinkies valued over 300?
Friends in Love by Lil Jon, also flirting with Crump. Sometimes wanna be your lover, sometimes wanna be your friend, sometimes we crank too.
Sometime wanna be your lover, sometime wanna be your friend, sometime wanna...
In the second half, man, he really embraced the mainstream pop sound. In 2006, he simply appeared on Fergie's album The Duchess on the song Glamorous, which was a huge hit.
Champagne witnesses, caviar dreams, you deserve nothing.
Of the decade kept Ludacris on top. In 2010, actually, I think it was one of the peak years for Ludacris's features. He was rapping together with Tayo Cruz on his mega hit Break Your Heart, which we've already talked about here in the exclusive video about Tayo Cruz, about how this song ended up in Ludacris's hands.
Worst of the best, but you gotta respect my honesty, and I may break your heart.
At the same time, he was on the dance floors with the song Tonight I'm Loving You or Tonight I'm Fucking You by Enrique Iglesias. It's too late, I love you. And last but not least, he was on one of the most memorable songs of that decade, if not the most memorable, right? Which is the song Baby by Justin Bieber, who until then was a teenage phenomenon who introduced Ludacris to a new generation. When I
was 13, I had my first love. There was nobody that compared to...
Man, real talk, commercially that was genius, man, because he was expanding his flow to something beyond Atlanta rap, you know? Man, seriously, no words, man. Business strategy, Ludacris was a genius. But I don't need to tell you guys that for the hardcore crowd, that was like the last straw, you know? The truth is that Ludacris was way too comfortable writing First Class in pop culture. And it was exactly with this global superstar status that Hollywood knocked on his door once again, and this time he opened it. And with an offer he couldn't refuse, it was time for Ted Parker to come back and hit the gas. And from 2011 on, my brother, the game changed. Forget the little street racing story, now things were big. Universal Pictures decided to turn the franchise into a true global heist and action blockbuster with Fast 5. They managed to bring the entire original cast back with some big new additions, and even Ted Parker was coming back now with a new role. He was no longer just the backyard mechanic, he was the group's technology and hacking specialist now. The movie was a huge worldwide success, grossing over $620 million, which meant the music had to step up to Ludacris's standards. The years went by. Fast and Furious 6 broke records in 2013, and the studio demanded massive promotional tours, red carpets in Europe and Asia, and months of filming. So my brother, now it really seemed like rap had become just a side hobby for Ludacris. Until we get to 2015, and that year was truly the year of duality between Christopher Bridges, Ludacris, and Ted Parker. The triality, let's put it that way. On movie screens, Furious 7 premiered, the most exciting, most creative, most anticipated, and most profitable film of that franchise, earning nothing less than $1.5 billion worldwide. Man, the whole world was mourning the death of Paul Walker, and this would be the first movie without the big star of the franchise, and at the same time the world applauded the way Fast and Furious brought the star back. Anyway, there was no way it wouldn't be another success.
Oh, I'll tell you all about it when I see you.
But at almost the same time, Ludacris decided he was going to give another response to the purist hip-hop community. After a long 7-year hiatus without releasing a full project, he dropped the album Ludaversal. And then the contrast was inevitable, man. While we saw Ludacris in all kinds of newspaper articles, interviews, even interviews here in Brazil, I think he gave one at that time, talking about the movie, talking about Paul Walker, and so on. We were also going to listen to the album. Ludacris's album basically had a quiet debut and disappeared from the charts, something that had never happened before in the rapper's career. And then the most hardcore fans didn't hold back their criticism. They said the album was dated, that Ludacris didn't have that hunger he used to have, that his creativity was already gone. Anyway guys, it seemed like Luda's pen had run out of ink. The 2010s went by, and in the second half of the decade, it really seemed like things had changed in the guy's life. And Ludacris's routine had simply turned into a billion-dollar cycle, let's put it that way. Fast and Furious 8 in 2017, Fast and Furious 9 in 2021, the 10th movie in 2023, and so on. Ted Parker became a lifelong character in one of the biggest franchises in movie history. In music, a little feature here, a cameo there, a nostalgic chat about the first albums, and people are just supposed to be happy with that. The most hardcore rap fans kept demanding, but let's be honest, as the years went by, people understood that Ludacris's focus started to change and the pressure even started to ease up a bit, right? Because everyone had already gotten the message, but the truth is, Christopher Bridges was playing a game that was much bigger than all this hustle. That's because radio and his music management studies back then weren't for nothing. The guy was always a real business strategist. And with the mountain of money that Hollywood must have dumped into this guy's new bank account, man, he didn't think twice and diversified his empire. Ludacris opened successful restaurants, invested heavily in real estate, and launched his own line of headphones. And he even created a very successful children's animated series on Netflix called Karma's World, inspired by his oldest daughter, as well as acting in other movies out there. Over the years, I also want to highlight that movie End of the Road he did with Queen Latifah in 2022, which I even reviewed here on this channel at the time. And I remember that at the time I even said that Ludacris wasn't a rapper anymore. He was, man, a global player in the entertainment business. Anything related to entertainment, the guy was involved. But then 2026 came around and I can say I was briefly mistaken. And if you miss Ludacris's classic pen game, don't worry, not all is lost. Recently, Luda showed signs of life, shaking up the community with the release of the single Pull Up, a track that brings back all that nostalgia from his old music videos, all over the top, full of cartoonish elements, that southern pen game, the kind of work only he knows how to do.
I ain't never ever seen a body like hers, type of body that'll make
And for the even more excited fans, he said that was just the calling card because there's a new album on the way. And that's proof that Ludacris's eye of the tiger was always there and that his pen came out of the drawer to write a new page for the new chapter in Ludacris's story. So, in light of all this, the big question remains. After all, did Fast and Furious ruin Ludacris's rap career, or actually did it save his career as an entertainer overall? For me, the answer is, it depends. For some hip-hop purists and for those nostalgic for the 2000s, the answer will almost always be a certain sense of regret. But if we look at it from a human and business perspective, Ludacris made the most brilliant decision of his life. Man, it's because nobody stays at the top of rap forever. I think that in any music genre, nobody stays at the top. Nobody keeps making money for their whole life. Man, nobody. How many stars from that golden era of the 2000s have disappeared from the scene today, or are begging for attention, or are just living off nostalgia, declared bankruptcy? Anyway, we've already told several stories like that here on this channel. I think Ludacris realized this back then in the 2000s at his peak. And he kind of sacrificed, in quotes, his status as a rap god or goat of that generation. For him to get into another business that financially could maybe be more profitable. We also can't say if, man, it was Ludacris's idea to be a rapper for the rest of his rap. I mean, for the rest of his life, or if he wanted to diversify his artistic field. Did you guys see that, man? The guy started as a radio host, became a rapper, then went into movies, and now he's also in the business world. Man, the guy has the talent to make a lot of money in many other areas. But talking about Fast and Furious, in 2023, he gave an interview on a podcast where he said that with every Fast and Furious movie that comes out, even though everyone keeps saying, why are you making another movie? Why are you making another movie? They invest very little by Hollywood standards, right? And it made billions of dollars.
And I also hear people say all the time, why do you keep making these movies? That's the dumb question, because we're making billions of fucking dollars.
So, if you're making a ton of money with something that's working really well, why would you let criticism saying you abandoned your other skills or that you're doing it less often affect you? Man, look, I couldn't care less. I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but comment down below. But to wrap this up, Ludacris didn't lose the game, you know? He simply changed the rules of what it means to be a winner in the rap, hip-hop, and entertainment scene as a whole. And today, while he watches like it's a movie with billions coming into his account, he can look back with pride and know that his pen has already made history. And both the Fast and Furious franchise and other businesses that Ludacris is involved in, man, not only retired his pen, but also set up generations of his family. That's just my opinion. I want to hear your thoughts. This video will start a conversation, so comment below. We're in this together as I wrap up. Big hug to Gerson Saldanha. See you next time. See you in our next video, and thanks.